This is Russia's most highly secretive military intelligence unit that is widely believed to be responsible for a range of covert operations aimed at destabilizing governments, assassinating targets, and disrupting international relations. Russia's GRU Unit 29155 and their activities have had a far-reaching impact across the world. Even though their very existence has remained a closely guarded secret for many years, information about their operations began to surface around 2019, revealing a complex web of covert actions. This unit, GRU Unit 29155, is reportedly led by Major General Ari Navov, who's a senior officer in the GRU. It's said to operate out of the Russian main intelligence directorate, and specifically they work out of the 161st Special Purpose Training Center, which is located in the eastern part of Moscow. The base itself is known for training elite operatives for high-stakes operations. According to a former high-ranking CIA officer, the Russian unit's mission is to find, fix, and finish. What we see here is the frontline soldiers in a hybrid war, which blends conventional military force with covert operations. Hybrid warfare is designed to influence political outcomes. Many nations around the world have a history of similar units, just look up Operation Gladio, but today I want to focus on learning about the top 5 missions from Russia's GRU Unit 29155. The first mission is the Russian Bounty Program. In 2018, there was a joint operation between US Special Forces and the Afghan military where they raided a Taliban outpost. 13 people were arrested, and at first it seemed like a pretty typical mission. Wham bam, thank you man. But it was curious that one of the Afghans, named Rahmatullah Azizi, escaped to Russia. It got even more curious when the US soldiers found $500,000 inside Aziz's house in Kabul. The CIA then went on to identify him as the key middleman who collected cash payments of thousands of dollars from Russia, then distributed them to Taliban militants. And it was none other than GRU Unit 29155 that was allegedly this middleman organization facilitating the payments. According to officials, they were paying $100,000 per bounty. US soldiers are apparently worth a lot. Reports from US Special Operations and intelligence officers in Afghanistan date back to 2018. These reports were based on interrogations of captured militants. The accounts from these Taliban fighters who were captured, who all hailed from different regions across the country and had distinctly different tribes, were strikingly consistent in their details. They all described similar details: Russian operatives offering financial incentives for each American soldier killed. It was a revelation that sent shockwaves through the intelligence community, sparked a fierce debate over Russia's role in undermining US military efforts in Afghanistan. But it all lent credibility to the claims, seeing all of these different fighters say the same thing. So a 2019 car bombing near Bagram airfield was said to be linked to the mission as well. The explosion tore through a military convoy, killing 3 US Marines and injuring several others. If true, this would be the first time that a Russian GRU unit is known to have orchestrated an actual attack on Western military personnel. Before we go any further, I want to say right off the bat here that this is a controversial mission. Even the US intelligence agencies have given mixed assessments on whether or not it's true, and some say they're confident, some say they're not. I'm just telling you about an alleged story here about this murky covert operation, so take the information with a grain of salt. The existence of the program worked like this, allegedly. Russian intelligence agents offered cash bounties to Taliban-linked militants for killing US and coalition forces in Afghanistan. The plot was first made public 2 years after the initial information started coming out in 2020, when the Washington Post was the first to report that there was this intelligence suggesting the existence of a Russian bounty operation. However, the Defense Department reported the US military intelligence couldn't corroborate the program at all. They claimed that they had a, quote, low to moderate confidence, end quote, that the bounty program even existed. That means that it was credibly sourced and plausible, but falling short of near certainty. I should point out, though, that the NSA dissented from that opinion and believed even less in it. They said they did not have information to support that conclusion at the same level, which means it was even more dubious from their point of view at the NSA. Now, you might be surprised to learn that Russia initially supported the United States war on terror and even agreed to provide logistics for the war in Afghanistan. However, by May 2015, Moscow closed a key military transport corridor that allowed NATO NATO to send supplies to Afghanistan through Russian territory. Basically, the US used a Russian transshipment hub at Ulyanovsk in Russia. Its practical usefulness was little by 2015, but the thing is, it carried a lot of political symbolism that both sides cooperated on it. So it was big news when it was shut down. Obviously, it happened as a result of Russia's invasion of Crimea, which put the two sides on tense terms. According to Carter Malkasian, a former advisor to US military commanders in Afghanistan, Russia started supplying arms and funds to the Taliban around the same time in 2015, although Russian officials publicly denied the claims as baseless. Even within US intelligence community, the Russian bounty allegations have sparked fierce debate and conflicting conclusions. I mean, we do know that Iran was paying around $1,000 per American soldier killed at one point, but solid proof on Russia has been more elusive. Andrei Kortunure, director of the Russian International Affairs Council, claimed making payments to the Taliban would harm Russia's interests by creating instability and promoting terrorism. There's another theory that I don't see a lot of people talking about, but the US and its intelligence agencies could have had an interest in covering the story up or saying it wasn't true because of what it would mean if it were true. If the US publicly said this was happening, it would require some kind of overt action against Russia in 2015, or they would look weak. It could be that the US chose to fight back through similar covert means by increasing aid to Ukraine, for instance. But officials have pushed for further investigations, viewing these payments as an irrefutable act of hostility, while others argue that the evidence remains circumstantial. Yet multiple sources familiar with the matter confirm that the US military took the threat seriously. They ramped up efforts to track and intercept Russian operatives in Afghanistan and across Central Asia. To give you a short bit of context before we get into the next mission, I try to stay as objective and accurate as possible when it comes to geopolitics, but today's news can make that hard to do in our highly polarized world, which is why I strongly recommend checking out our partners at Ground News. They're an app and website that aggregates stories for thousands of local and international outlets so readers can compare news coverage comprehensively. With every story, Ground News provides additional context on each source's potential bias, how credible their reporting is, and even if they're independently owned or influenced by a corporation. They also make it easy to flip between headlines to see how different biases shape the narrative. Another unique feature I find especially useful is their blind spot feed, where you'll find important news either side is barely giving attention to. I encourage you to check it out at ground.news/task. Ground News is independent and subscriber funded, but my viewers save 40% on unlimited access this month. By supporting them, you're not only supporting my work, you're contributing to bringing transparency to the information we consume. But Russian Unit 29155's aggression goes beyond the battlefield. Operations are not just confined to physical assassinations and coup attempts. The unit has also been heavily involved in cyber warfare and sabotage. In 2024, the Wall Street Journal reported that Western security officials had uncovered a Russian sabotage operation involving incendiary devices which were implanted in electric messengers with a magnesium-based flammable substance were designed to ignite fires aboard aircraft en route to the United States and Canada. Security experts concluded the devices were part of a broader Russian campaign to disrupt aviation security and further destabilize Western countries. In addition to this sabotage operation, Unit 29155 has been implicated in a series of cyber attacks targeting critical infrastructure in the United States, Europe, and Ukraine. These attacks, often linked to Russia's ongoing geopolitical campaigns, have sought to compromise government systems, interfere with military operations, and undermine trust in the digital infrastructure of allied nations. The GRU's cyber activities have included mapping vulnerabilities in the US energy grids, interfering with election processes, and deploying malware to disrupt vital services like your water supply. The unit's operation extended to Ukraine, where it's been linked to multiple high-profile cyber attacks aimed at destabilizing Ukrainian government systems and infrastructure. These operations are seen as part of Russia's ongoing hybrid warfare strategy against Ukraine. The next story is one of the most brazen and widely verified attacks. I think it shows the lengths that governments will go to intimidate people not to oppose them. Intimidation tactics often work to suppress media and governments unless people are willing to stand up to them. And stand up to them is exactly what the Czech Republic did, as we'll see in this next story. On October 16, 2014, a devastating explosion tore through an ammunition warehouse near the village of Verbitica in the Czech Republic's Zin region. The blast killed 2 employees and scattered unexploded ordnance across the area, forcing evacuations of nearby communities. Less than 2 months later, On December 3rd, a second explosion rocked through the warehouse in the same complex. This deepened concerns about the safety of the site. Initially, it was treated as accidents. These explosions would later be revealed as deliberate acts of sabotage linked to Russian GRU operatives, sparking an international crisis and shedding light on the evolving nature of hybrid warfare. The affected warehouses contained a variety of munitions meant for transport to Ukrainian forces, according to internal reports, which at the time, Ukraine was caught up in a conflict with Russian-backed separatists. By targeting the depot, Russia not only disrupted potential supplies, but also demonstrated its willingness to use covert sabotage to achieve strategic objectives and intimidate a government. These kind of intimidation tactics can be effective. In the immediate aftermath, authorities struggled to secure the site. Recovery operations were slow, and the incident was initially investigated as just an industrial accident. However, this narrative began to unravel. Roughly 7 years later, in April 2021, Czech officials announced that the explosion was the work of operatives from Russia's GRU.
These are the two men the Czech government wants to question. They travelled to Prague in 2014 on Russian passports under the names of Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Boshirov.
Investigators revealed the operatives had entered the Czech Republic using false identities.
The men said they'd gone to Salisbury for some sightseeing, particularly the city's cathedral spire.
This evidence tied them to the bombings. There was significant diplomatic fallout after this crisis. In response to the findings, the Czech government expelled 18 Russian diplomats, alleged that they were intelligence operatives. Russia retaliated by expelling 20 Czech diplomats. This further escalated tensions. The Czech Republic also received strong support from NATO and its EU allies. Several countries coordinated their own expulsion of Russian officials in solidarity, marking a unified response to the state-sponsored sabotage and showing that these intimidation tactics would not work. GRU 29155 has been implicated in several lethal suspicious poisonings. The Bulgarian arms dealer Emilian Gebrev, his son, and one of their company executives were poisoned in Sofia in April 2015. Russian operative Denis Sergeyev was identified as being present in Bulgaria at that same time. The motive is believed to be related to Gebrev's arms supplies to Ukraine, but the next poisoning was even more wild from a geopolitical point of view. The Skripal poisoning was a notorious assassination attempt in March of 2018. Unit 29155 was implicated in one of the most brazen assassination attempts carried out on foreign soil in recent history. It was the poisoning of a former Russian double agent, Sergei Skripal, and his daughter Yulia in Salisbury, England. The attack involved a nerve agent called Novichok, a deadly chemical weapon developed by the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Both Skripal and his daughter were critically ill but survived, though they suffered long-term health complications as a result of the attack. The United Kingdom swiftly attributed the attack to the Russian state, and British authorities charged 2 Russian GRU officers with attempted murder, conspiracy, and the alleged possession of a chemical weapon. The Russian government denied any involvement, claiming that the accusations were part of a Western smear campaign. Unit 29155's involvement in the Skripal poisoning is significant because it underscores the unit's ability to conduct high-profile, politically motivated operations beyond Russia's borders. French media reports suggested that the 2 agents, Petrov and Boshirov, had spent time in the French Alps, which was believed to be a base for Unit 29155's operations in Europe. The case highlighted the growing concern in Western countries about Russian intelligence operatives on European soil and Russia's willingness to employ violent tactics in order to silence perceived enemies of the state. European and American intelligence agencies have been monitoring up to 15 members of Unit 29155 who had spent time in France. French authorities considered the area of the French Alps to be a rear base for the unit's covert operations. This attack on foreign soil was not an isolated incident. Germany expelled 2 Russian diplomats after authorities determined that Russian agents were responsible for orchestrating an execution-style killing in Berlin. The victim, a 40-year-old Russian Georgian-born citizen, had been designated a terrorist by Moscow. According to German prosecutors, the man had fought with a Georgian military unit during the 2008 Georgia-Russia war. It's not all about paying for murder and poisoning, though. In 2016, Montenegro found itself at the center of a high-stakes Cold War-style conspiracy that reads like a spy thriller. On the eve of the country's pivotal election, a group of plotters, including alleged Russian operatives, attempted a bold coup designed to derail Montenegro's plans to join NATO. The plan was audacious: storm the parliament, assassinate the prime minister, and install a pro-Russian government that would keep Montenegro out of the Western alliance. The coup plotters were said to be well organized and had covert support from shadowy figures linked to, you guessed it, Russia's notorious GRU Unit 29155. There were two key players, Eduard Shishmakov and Vladimir Moiseyev, both Russian nationals with GRU backgrounds. They were identified as ringleaders, allegedly coordinating the operation and funneling support to the coup organizers. The plot seemed to have been meticulously planned. Reports indicate the armed men were to blend into crowds and stage protests as cover while other targeted government buildings. The operation was set to unfold on election day, creating chaos and clearing the way for a swift takeover. But the plan unraveled just in time. Montenegrin authorities reportedly were tipped off by Western intelligence, who swooped in, thwarting the attempts in a dramatic fashion. Arrests were made, and the alleged involvement of Russian intelligence sparked international outrage. The thwarted coup attempt marked a tense moment in geopolitics of Eastern Europe, fueling suspicions of Russian meddling in sovereign nations' affairs. While Moscow denied involvement, the incident revealed Russia's far-reaching strategy to destabilize NATO by any means necessary. Montenegro joined NATO in 2017 despite the attempted interference, sending a message to Moscow that the world would not be intimidated. To this day, the 2016 Montenegrin coup attempt remains a stark reminder of the lengths to which powerful states will go to shape global alliances and the resilience of smaller nations to chart their own course. One of the most high-profile and mysterious operations attributed to Russia's covert operatives, specifically the notorious Unit 29155, is the global phenomenon known as Havana syndrome. It began as a disturbing medical mystery in 2016 when U.S. diplomats stationed in Havana, Cuba, started reporting a cascade of inexplicable health issues, from headaches, intense dizziness, nausea, tinnitus, which ringing in the ear, and visual and auditory distortions that left victims stunned and bewildered. In severe cases, these symptoms escalated to mild traumatic brain injuries, affecting their ability to work and leading to prolonged cognitive struggles. What made it even stranger was that many of the victims described a sudden and overpowering pressure in one side of their head, almost as if an invisible weapon was trained on them, igniting suspicions of a new kind of warfare. Soon, these strange afflictions spread beyond Havana, turning up in embassies and consulates across the world. In China, Russia, and even on US soil, a remarkable 1,000 amount of cases, from high-level CIA officers and military personnel to diplomatic staff and even their families. They all were documented over a span of 8 years. Pets and children of those affected also displayed symptoms. Early theories about the cause range from environmental toxins to psychological factors, but as more victims surfaced, experts began zeroing in on directed energy weapons, possibly acoustic or microwave-based. Directed energy weapons can create powerful beams that, when focused, have the capacity to disorient or even damage the human brain, manifesting as the troubling symptoms reported by the victims. An investigative probe by the Insider, 60 Minutes, and Der Spiegel later shed light on an unsettling connection to Russia's notorious Unit 29155. Phone records, travel logs, and intelligence documents suggested that known operatives from Unit 29155 had been in close proximity to several Havana syndrome locations just before incidents occurred, including the first reported case in Frankfurt in 2014, which coincidentally took place in the same year as Russia's annexation of Crimea. This timeline hinted that Havana syndrome could be part of a sustained campaign of covert attacks. Adding credibility to these claims is that investigators found that several senior members of the unit had received awards for developing non-lethal acoustic weapons, adding weight to the theory that directed energy weapons, specifically those with sonic or microwave capabilities, were being used in the attacks. The implications are chilling. A series of intelligence leaks suggested that Moscow was experimenting with these technologies, and that Unit 29155 operatives had a green light to deploy them against US personnel in targeted ways. These revelations triggered a wave of concern across Western intelligence agencies, raising questions about about the extent of Russian involvement. Did Moscow use Havana syndrome as a testbed for a new kind of silent, invisible weapon that could not only incapacitate but also evade detection? In 2020, a collaborative investigation with intercepted intelligence revealed that operatives linked to the unit were regularly moving through several cities, often shortly before a reported Havana syndrome incident. Among the affected was a high-ranking CIA officer in Moscow, whose symptoms were severe enough to prompt an emergency flight out of Russia. U.S. intelligence began to piece together a pattern, noting the strategic placement of suspected Russian operatives near locations. In 2021, dozens of U.S. personnel stationed in Vienna, including diplomats, intelligence officials, all reported having Havana syndrome-like symptoms, and the State Department confirmed that they were investigating it. The New Yorker claimed that the U.S. government, their working hypothesis was that GRU agents had been aiming microwave radiation devices at U.S. officials to collect intelligence from their computers and cell phones, and that these devices can cause serious harm to the people they target. According to two officials interviewed by Politico, while investigators have not determined definitively these incidents caused by a specific weapon, some believe any such device would be primarily transported by a vehicle, and some could be small enough to even fit in a large backpack, and individuals could be targeted from 500 to 1,000 yards away. Despite these findings, official response remains ambiguous. In March 2023, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a report controversially stating that it was very unlikely that a foreign adversary was behind these health incidents. This sparked anger and frustration among affected diplomats who felt abandoned by their government. The conclusions were far from satisfying for anyone who had endured the condition. Some pointed to a broader pattern of silence, suggesting that acknowledging directed energy weapons as the cause might open up a Pandora's box of other classified activities. In January 2022, the CIA claimed that it was not likely the result of a global campaign by a hostile power, and that 976 out of 1,000 cases reviewed were likely natural causes. 5 of the 7 agencies involved in generating the report concluded the available intelligence consistently points against the involvement of U.S. adversaries in causing the incidents, and that foreign adversaries' involvement was very unlikely. The U.S. government has taken various measures in response to the growing threat posed by Unit 29155. In 2021, the Department of State announced a reward of up to $10 million for information leading to the identification or location of individuals involved with Unit 29155. In addition, the United States has levied sanctions against Russia for the covert operations. Despite these efforts, the full extent of the unit's operations remain unclear. The U.S. intelligence community has struggled to identify and dismantle the unit. Its activities strain U.S.-Russian relations. It's certainly a global threat to keep an eye on. As the unit continues to operate under the radar, the implications of its actions are far-reaching. It remains clear that Unit 29155 plays a central role in Russia's covert war against the West. But before you guys go, I want to let you know that and announce this, that I'm on Pepperbox now, where you can see exclusive new show that I'm doing, where I analyze hardcore combat footage from around the world, see each episode early without ads. For instance, you'll get access to my trip to the front lines in Ukraine, in Kursk, Russia, a little bit early, and get access to all the content from Fat Electrician, Donut Operator, Brandon Herrera, and more. The link is in the description. Check it out if you're interested.